Have you ever wondered why the most honest, virtuous people often end up with the least power? Why the kindest leaders are sidelined, their wisdom ignored, while those with less character climb higher and faster? We tell ourselves that goodness is rewarded, that integrity is the path to influence. But history suggests otherwise. Again and again, it is not the best among us who rise. It is the bold, the deceptive, the shamelessly strategic. There is a dark and uncomfortable truth beneath the stories we are taught to believe. That being good, genuinely good, might be the very reason you never lead. Not because goodness has no value, but because power obeys different laws. Today we begin an exploration into one of the most misrepresented ideas in political philosophy. An idea that has outlasted empires, toppled idealists, and shaped every hierarchy you've ever lived in. The idea that morality, when unguarded, can become a weakness, that the pursuit of virtue without strategy can make you prey. Niccolo Machiavelli, the Florentine thinker, who has become synonymous with manipulation and ruthlessness, did not create this reality. He merely described it. He observed a world in which those who wished to do good, who wished to rule justly and kindly, were devoured by those who understood what power actually demanded. His warning was not that goodness is wrong, but that it is fragile. And if you do not understand the rules of the game, your virtue becomes irrelevant, or worse, dangerous to yourself. This may sound harsh, even cynical, but consider how often you've seen it play out. The employee who speaks the truth and is punished. The honest politician who is crushed under the weight of a ruthless campaign. The kind-hearted leader who cannot control their own team. Meanwhile, those who manipulate, lie, posture, they rise, not despite their actions, but often because of them. Why? To understand this paradox, we must begin where Machiavelli began, not with ideals, but with reality. In his words, a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must come to ruin among so many who are not good. Here, the truth is unveiled with brutal clarity. It is not that being good is inherently bad. It is that the world is not shaped for it. The systems of power, whether in politics, corporations, or personal relationships, reward different traits. Certainty over doubt, appearance over substance, strategy over sincerity. Machiavelli was not celebrating this. He was diagnosing it. He saw that many rulers failed not because they lacked virtue, but because they were too bound by it. They refused to see the world as it was. They entered a battlefield armed with good intentions, while their opponents brought cunning and force. And as history shows, it is not the most righteous who shape the world. It is those who are willing to understand its ugliness and act accordingly. Think of Julius Caesar. Think of Alexander. Think of modern leaders who rose through charisma, spectacle, and control. Did they win because they were good, or because they understood when to seem good and when to abandon it entirely? This is the first distinction Machiavelli forces us to confront, the difference between being good and appearing good. He writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." And this simple truth, applied relentlessly, can explain centuries of political behavior. We live in a world where perception often outweighs reality, where image shapes authority more than substance. And those who fail to master that perception, no matter how noble their cause, are outmaneuvered. In this context, goodness, true internal goodness, offers no guarantee. In fact, it often leaves you exposed, because while you hesitate, your rival acts. While you reflect, they declare. While you question your next move, they've already secured the room. This is not an endorsement of cruelty. It is an invitation to open your eyes, to see that power does not reward the hesitant, the self-doubting, or the overtly principled, unless they know when to set those principles aside. Being good becomes a liability when it makes you predictable, when it limits your options, when it convinces you that others will play by the same rules. But they won't, and they never have. Socrates was good. So was Cicero. Both were destroyed by the very societies they tried to uplift. Their goodness did not shield them, it marked them. They stood for truth, but they forgot that truth alone does not win, not without strategy, not without force, not without a brutal awareness of the world they were confronting. Compare them to Caesar, to Augustus, to the leaders who understood that to survive and to shape the world, one must sometimes betray virtue, not for pleasure, but for preservation. This is the Machiavellian truth. Power is not about being liked. It is about being effective, being respected, being feared if necessary. Machiavelli did not suggest we abandon ethics entirely. He argued that ethics must be subordinate to results, that a ruler who clings to goodness, when the times require severity, will fall. It is necessary for a prince who wishes to maintain his position to learn how not to be good, he wrote. This is not a call to villainy. It is a recognition that purity, in a world of wolves, invites destruction. The lion who refuses to hunt dies. The deer who preaches peace is eaten. You may ask, is this not a bleak worldview? Perhaps, but Machiavelli would say it is a useful one, because it prepares you, it arms you, it reminds you that goodness, to have any impact, must be wielded like a weapon, carefully, strategically, and with a full understanding of the terrain. Blind virtue is no virtue at all. It is a liability dressed in noble language. So ask yourself, not whether you are good, but whether your goodness is effective, whether it serves you or sabotages you, whether it is a conscious choice or a default setting. Because those who wish to do good must first survive, and to survive, you must know when to step out of the light and into the shadows. But what if your morality isn't just holding you back? What if it's empowering your enemies? Not only does morality fail to secure influence, but those who cling to it too tightly often empower the very forces that will destroy them. This is the second wound that Machiavelli exposes, the tragic irony that moral clarity, when unchecked by strategic caution, makes you useful to your enemies and invisible to your allies. You become the noble fool, the reliable servant, the principled voice no one listens to when the stakes rise. And all the while, those without your convictions build thrones atop your silence. Machiavelli observed, with sharp precision, that the game of power is not played on a level field. It is tilted, always, toward those who are willing to cross lines. Because the lines themselves, the rules of honor, fairness, mercy, are not enforced by nature. They are maintained by consent, and those who choose to break them while others obey enjoy a fundamental asymmetry. One side is bound, the other is free. Consider the fate of Thomas More, the devout Englishman who refused to betray his conscience in the court of Henry VIII. His virtue was undeniable, his legacy immortalized, but his head was separated from his body. Because in a contest between principle and power, principle only survives if it adapts. And adaptation requires what many good men lack, the willingness to confront darkness without losing themselves in it. This is the tightrope Machiavelli teaches us to walk. He does not urge us to become tyrants. He urges us to become intelligent, to ask not what is fair, but what is effective, not what ought to be done, but what must be done. If the survival of your ideals requires their temporary compromise, is that not still service to the greater good? If preserving a republic demands a moment of cruelty, is the cruelty not justified by the preservation itself? These questions are dangerous. They threaten the simple binaries we crave, good versus evil, right versus wrong. But simplicity, as we learned, is often a refuge for the powerless. The real world is complex, chaotic, and ruled not by intentions, but by outcomes. Machiavelli understood this better than most, and so must we. Nowhere is this more visible than in the political arena, where virtue is marketed but rarely practiced. Every campaign, every speech is drenched in moral performance, the language of justice, unity, service. But behind the curtain lies calculation, compromise, and ruthless strategy. Those who win are not those who remain untainted, but those who stain themselves carefully, strategically, invisibly. This is not corruption, it is adaptation. Look to Abraham Lincoln, revered for his moral clarity, yet he suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. Look to Churchill, the lion of democracy, who navigated empire with calculated cruelty. These were not hypocrites, they were realists. Their virtue survived not because it remained pure, but because it was protected by force, by compromise, by the willingness to act when others hesitated. The modern world still demands this blend. CEOs who survive crises, activists who move systems, parents who protect their children in a broken society. None can afford purity untouched by pragmatism, because the enemies of virtue are never passive. They adapt, they infiltrate, they learn the language of your values and use them against you. And if you refuse to respond, If you cling to the comfort of righteousness, they will win. Machiavelli saw this in the fall of Florence, a city paralyzed by its ideals while enemies prepared their swords. He saw it in the church, wielding moral language as a shield while committing unspeakable acts. He saw it in every prince who believed that goodness alone would protect him from betrayal. And he was proven right, again and again, by the corpses of those who believed otherwise. But there is another, subtler danger, that the pursuit of goodness becomes a substitute for courage, that moral purity becomes an excuse for inaction. How many times have you heard someone say, "I could never do that, it's not who I am," while the world around them burns? How often does goodness become passive, self-congratulatory, detached from the consequences it refuses to face? There is no virtue in being harmless. There is no honor in being weak. Machiavelli forces us to confront this, that true virtue, if it is to mean anything, must be paired with strength, that goodness without power is not noble, it is irrelevant. So how do we move forward? How does one act in a corrupt world without becoming corrupted? The answer is not to abandon your values. It is to weaponize them, to understand when they serve you and when they must be temporarily set aside, to know that mercy without the threat of punishment is not mercy, it is permission. The lion is feared because he has claws, even if he does not always use them. The wise man is respected because he could destroy, but chooses not to. Power restrained is more compelling than power denied. And to wield power, you must be willing to step outside the comfortable confines of moral certainty. This does not mean becoming a monster, it means becoming whole, recognizing that darkness exists within you, and learning how to command it rather than be ruled by it. The person who cannot lie is not honest, they are limited. The person who can lie, but chooses the truth, has made a moral choice. That is the kind of leader Machiavelli respected. Not the saint, but the strategist. Not the innocent, but the aware. Ask yourself, is your morality a shield or a shackle? Is it protecting something greater or keeping you from the arena? Because the arena does not care about your virtue. It responds only to action, and if you are too moral to act, someone less moral will act in your place. This is not a call to cynicism. It is a call to clarity, to see the world as it is, and to meet it with eyes open, because only then can you shape it. Only then can goodness survive, not by standing apart from power, but by entering it, mastering it, and using it with intention. But what happens when goodness becomes a performance, and the spotlight becomes the trap? It is not merely that virtue fails to guarantee power, it is that virtue, when publicly declared and consistently displayed, becomes a map for your enemies, a predictable pattern they can exploit, a script they can read while writing your downfall. Consider this. When your actions are bound by a strict moral code, everyone around you knows your limits. They know what you will and will not do. They know you will not lie, will not betray, will not strike first. In a contest of power, this is not noble. This is tactical suicide. You have made yourself legible, and in the hands of a cunning rival, legibility is a weakness more dangerous than ignorance. History has no shortage of examples. Consider the fate of Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, whose commitment to peace made him predictable. Hitler read him like a book. Chamberlain's virtue became his leash. Or think of Eastern philosophers like Confucius, whose teachings emphasized harmony and self-restraint. Beautiful ideals, yet how many dynasties fell because they adhered too long to ideals in the face of disorder and violence? Machiavelli was not impressed by virtue unarmed. He admired cunning cloaked in dignity. He understood that in a world filled with predators, the sheep who announces his path is not spared, he is hunted. This is why Machiavelli warned against being entirely good. Not because goodness is wrong, but because total goodness leaves no room for maneuver, and power demands maneuver. When you hide behind goodness, you become transparent, and transparent people do not win in opaque games. Let us go further. Suppose you are virtuous, but also intelligent. Suppose you know the cost of public morality, and so you guard yourself. Even then, you face another problem: expectations. The higher your ethical image, the more others will demand you stay within it. You will be judged more harshly for small deviations than others are for great sins. A slip from you will be called hypocrisy. A crime from your rival will be forgiven as strategy. Why? Because once you are labeled good, the world begins to punish you for being human. This is the price of the pedestal. Machiavelli understood that public image is not armor, it is a trap. To be seen as virtuous is not to be safe. It is to be scrutinized, to be held hostage by appearances. This is why the most dangerous men in history rarely wore their virtue on their sleeve. They chose ambiguity. They revealed little. They said just enough, and they allowed others to project greatness onto them. Machiavelli favored the fox, the creature who hides his tracks, who deceives not for pleasure, but for survival. In The Prince, he writes, "A wise ruler ought never to keep faith when by doing so it would be against his interest." Now, to the modern ear, this may sound appalling, but pause and consider the implication. Machiavelli is not advocating for betrayal. He is reminding us that blind loyalty is a form of self-harm, that in some situations the greater good, or even survival, requires deception. This does not make you evil. It makes you aware. It makes you capable. It gives you range. Imagine a world where no one ever lied. Not to protect someone, not to buy time, not to outmaneuver a dangerous actor. It would be a world of fools. A world where the first liar wins forever. Now ask yourself, are you prepared to live in such a world without knowing how to navigate it? The game of power is not played in sunlight. It is played in shadow, and in the shadows those who are too brightly lit become targets. But there is another, even more dangerous myth we must destroy. The myth that goodness is contagious, that if you model it long enough, the world will follow. This is a comforting illusion, taught to children and echoed in shallow speeches. But Machiavelli knew better. He knew that when power is at stake, most people follow strength, not virtue. They follow decisiveness, boldness, the illusion of certainty. Do not mistake applause for agreement. Do not confuse admiration for influence. The world may praise your goodness, but it obeys confidence. Look at the studies. Overconfident leaders, regardless of skill, are rated more highly than cautious experts. Narcissists rise faster in unstructured groups. Voters prefer candidates who promise absolutes, even when those absolutes are impossible. We are wired to follow clarity, not complexity, and goodness, true goodness, is always complex. So the paradox deepens. If you are too good, you are sidelined. If you are visibly good, you are attacked. If you believe goodness alone will change others, you are deceived. Power does not bend to your virtue. It bends to your leverage. This is not a reason to abandon ethics. It is a reason to evolve, to mature, to see goodness, not as your only weapon, but as one of many, one to be used, withheld, sharpened, and, when needed, cloaked. And what of those who cling to goodness anyway? Who say, "I'd rather be true than powerful"? Machiavelli would say this, then prepare to be ruled, because someone else with fewer scruples and more resolve will fill the vacuum you leave behind. The world will always be ruled, either by those who understand it or those who deny it. If the good retreat, they do not purify the world, they abandon it. So choose, learn the rules, study the terrain, adapt your strategy, or remain noble and powerless. But do not say you weren't warned. But even if you master deception, what if you're still clinging to the most dangerous illusion of all? There is a seductive comfort in believing that good intentions are enough, that if your heart is pure and your goals are noble, the world will eventually recognize your worth. This illusion is one of the most dangerous lies a society can tell its citizens, that merit is visible, that truth defends itself, and that history bends toward justice on its own. Machiavelli knew better. He knew that history does not favor the righteous. It favors the prepared, the bold, the cunning. He saw clearly that intentions, however noble, mean nothing without execution. That power does not flow to the deserving, but to the determined. Consider this. How many revolutions were led by philosophers? How many kingdoms were preserved by poets? Intellect and morality without force, without organization, without strategy, these do not shape events. They decorate them. They write the epilogues after others have written the laws. You may feel resistance to this truth. That's understandable. It contradicts the stories we are told growing up. Stories where the good prevail, the bad are punished, and virtue is its own reward. But Machiavelli reminds us that power is not a reward, it is a tool, and tools are taken, not given. He wrote, "One must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." This is not metaphor, this is instruction. The successful man is not only moral or only strong, he is both. He navigates deception with intelligence and meets aggression with force. He is unpredictable, flexible. Above all, he is not paralyzed by the need to be seen as good. The obsession with appearances is another cage. In trying to be perceived as moral, many become performative. They chase applause instead of outcomes. They fear criticism more than failure, and so they remain trapped in a cycle of endless approval seeking, while those with fewer concerns about perception quietly consolidate real power. You see this in every institution. The moral leader gives speeches. The strategic leader secures resources. The good man hesitates. The ambitious man moves. And when the dust settles, it is the mover who holds the keys, not because he was better, but because he acted while others debated. In politics, this is called control of narrative. In business, it's called first mover advantage. In life, it's called dominance of frame. And in all these domains, goodness does not enter the equation unless it serves a purpose. So how should the truly wise man behave? Should he abandon virtue entirely? No, that would be nihilism. But he must understand when to use it and when to withhold it. Just as a surgeon does not always cut, a leader does not always forgive. Timing matters more than consistency. Results matter more than image. This is difficult for the moralist to accept. He believes that consistency is the highest virtue, that to change tactics is to betray oneself. But Machiavelli would say the opposite, that to cling to a single way of being, regardless of context, is to guarantee your destruction. The world is not static. Your strategy cannot be either. Reflect on this. When have you been most effective in your life? Was it when you followed rules blindly, or when you bent them carefully? Was it when you waited for approval, or when you acted on insight before others understood? These moments are not accidents. They are glimpses of strategic instinct, the very instinct Machiavelli urges you to sharpen. Too often, we hear that power corrupts, that to seek influence is to sell your soul. But the truth is more precise. Power reveals. It unmasks the capable. It exposes the unprepared. And it hands the stage to those who understand not what should be, but what is. It is easy to mock this view as cynical. But look at the world. The institutions we respect are often built not by saints, but by men of contradiction. Men who could be generous and ruthless, noble and deceptive, publicly virtuous and privately calculating. Their complexity did not make them evil. It made them effective. Take George Washington, revered for his leadership, yet willing to crush insurrection with severity. Take Nelson Mandela, a symbol of peace, who still understood the necessity of military resistance before he embraced negotiation. These were not soft men, they were strategic men. Their goodness endured because it was backed by strength. This is what Machiavelli understood better than any moralist. That if you want your values to survive, you must be willing to defend them with tools your enemies would use against you. Otherwise, your values will die, and you will be remembered not as noble, but as naive. And so, a hard truth must be faced. If you are not willing to act decisively, if you are not willing to be feared, if needed, you will eventually serve someone who is. You will not change the system. The system will absorb you. It will use your virtue to make itself look better while functioning exactly as it did before. This is the fate of the unprepared idealist, to be held up as a symbol while the real decisions are made elsewhere. So stop asking whether you are good. Start asking whether your goodness is effective, whether it is fortified, whether it is backed by leverage. Because without leverage, morality is noise. A beautiful noise, yes, but unheard in the halls where power is decided. But what if the real danger isn't just being powerless? It's being ruled by those who fear power and punish those who have it. By now, the illusion has cracked. We've torn through the fantasy that being good is enough, or even safe, in a world ruled not by virtue, but by velocity, leverage, and perception. Yet, Machiavelli forces us to confront something even darker, that systems, once infected by weakness at the top, do not merely remain corrupt, they reproduce corruption downward, like a virus. Incompetent leaders do not just fail, they architect environments that reward failure. And this rot does not stop with them. It spreads through every level of the institution, replacing excellence with loyalty, brilliance with obedience, competence with comfort. Why? Because someone who is threatened by the capable will always surround themselves with the incapable. It is a defense mechanism dressed as delegation. Machiavelli saw this firsthand in Renaissance courts. Fragile princes who filled their palaces with flatterers rather than thinkers. Cowards who elevated the timid over the bold. Tyrants who punished independent minds for threatening their illusion of control. In The Prince, he warned, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. That one line should terrify you, because it means rot is visible if you know where to look. And when you truly look, you start to notice it everywhere. You see it in businesses, where the CEO's inner circle consists not of challengers, but of cheerleaders. You see it in governments where dissent is not debated but silenced. You see it in academic institutions, where conformity is rewarded and originality punished. This is not dysfunction, it is design. Mediocrity protects itself by replicating. The insecure ruler wants subordinates who cannot challenge him. The weak manager wants a team that never questions his decisions. And so the chain of command becomes a chain of compromise, a hierarchy of hollow titles and empty minds. But here is the danger. The longer such a system persists, the harder it becomes to uproot. Because the original sin, the elevation of loyalty over competence, is compounded at every level. Over time, no one remembers what excellence looks like. The institution becomes a parody of itself, full of rituals, rules, and rank, but devoid of clarity, courage, or critical thought. This is not just political, it is psychological. The weak leader is often not consciously malicious. He simply feels threatened, he fears being exposed, and so he rewards those who reflect his image, people who will never outshine him, never challenge him, never force him to evolve. He creates an echo chamber of weakness, a palace of mirrors. And the good, the capable, the independent-minded, they are either exiled, neutralized, or forced to conform. Because in a system designed to protect incompetence, competence becomes dangerous. Ask yourself, have you ever seen someone punished, not for failing, but for trying too hard, for being too honest, for seeing too clearly? That is not paranoia, that is a signal. You are in a structure that fears strength more than it fears collapse. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He saw how rulers maintained their grip on fragile thrones, not by empowering talent, but by crippling it. He understood that fear of exposure leads the unworthy to sabotage the worthy, subtly, constantly, until brilliance becomes a threat rather than an asset. And it works. For a while, such rulers last years, sometimes decades. But the decay is cumulative. Eventually, the gap between appearance and reality becomes unbridgeable. Crises arise, and suddenly, no one competent is left to fix them. The emperor has no clothes. Worse, he has no tailors. This is how empires fall, not always by war, but by erosion. Erosion of standards, erosion of honesty, erosion of courage, and all of it hidden under the polite fiction that everything is fine, that the system is stable, the leader strong, the future secure. But history is merciless. It unmasks pretense. It rewards the prepared. It punishes illusions, no matter how beautifully performed. And so the question must be asked, how do you survive in a system like this? How do you keep your clarity, your ambition, your strength, when the environment punishes all three? You begin with this truth: you do not win by being visibly better. You win by being strategically invisible until the moment is right. In a corrupt structure, the honest man must become patient, not silent, not weak. Patient, he must observe, map the incentives, identify the fractures, and when the moment comes, the crisis, the vacuum, the turning tide, he must strike with precision. Machiavelli did not teach cowardice. He taught timing. He did not glorify betrayal. He glorified survival. And in a compromised system, survival is not granted to the loudest. It is granted to the most aware. So do not announce your virtue in a room that rewards vice. Do not display your strength before the weak are ready to crush it. Let your excellence be private. Let your vision be silent, until silence becomes strategy, and strategy becomes action. And when the throne finally wobbles, when the emperor finally stumbles, be ready. Be ready to offer not a speech, but a solution. Not a critique, but a plan. And not goodness for its own sake, but goodness fortified with force, cloaked in timing, sharpened by necessity. Because in the end, the system will either change you or you will change the system. But what if the system isn't just broken? What if it's rigged to punish the very people who could fix it? But what happens when the system cannot be changed? When every lever of reform has rusted, when every path to influence has been blocked, and every reward structure favors the shallow, the deceptive, the small-minded? What do the capable do when virtue becomes not only irrelevant, but punishable? Do they retreat? Do they adapt? Or do they, like Machiavelli, begin to build power in the shadows? There is a reason true strength often begins underground, because systems that reward incompetence and punish integrity do not leave space for honest ascension. In such environments, open ambition is dangerous, and goodness is dissected for weakness. So the wise do not announce their intentions, they prepare them. Machiavelli would say, this is where real power begins. Not in titles, not in declarations, but in quiet construction. In the cultivation of personal leverage, of deep alliances, of skills that are invisible until they must be shown. When the system is rigged against you, you do not try to climb its ladder. You build a new one, and make sure no one sees it being built. Understand this. When power cannot be taken through official means, it must be acquired unofficially. Through influence, through silence, through leverage that cannot be seen on spreadsheets or organizational charts. And here we enter the domain of the strategist. The strategist is not the loudest voice in the room. He is the one who listens while others speak too much. He is not the one chasing validation. He is the one who controls access, controls flow, controls timing. The strategist never declares war. He lets others trip into one, and then calmly, he becomes necessary. You see this in every great political figure who rose through treacherous terrain, not by opposing the system head-on, but by becoming indispensable to its function until they alone could fix what no one else understood. And when that moment came, they acted not out of desperation, but design. It is not Machiavellian to wait. It is Machiavellian to wait well. But patience is not passivity. You do not spend this time hoping, you spend it building. Every day you are denied the stage, you refine your voice. Every door that stays shut forces you to find another entrance. You build skills that others take for granted. You understand human nature so deeply that it ceases to surprise you. And when power falters, as it always does, you are not one of the shocked, you are one of the ready. This readiness is not merely technical, it is psychological. The strategist does not crave fairness. He accepts the world as it is. He does not need the world to approve of him. He needs the world to need him. And when he acts, it is not to make a point, it is to make a shift. This is what separates the moralist from the mover. The moralist waits for the rules to change. The mover learns to win while the rules are still corrupt. Machiavelli would call this virtue, not virtue in the modern sense, but a kind of ruthless adaptability, a dynamic strength, a disciplined will that does not break under injustice but bends around it. Virtue is not about being good, it is about being powerful in a broken world without becoming broken yourself. And if the world is built to elevate the mediocre, then the powerful man must become irrefutably excellent. Excellence, after all, is one of the few things that cannot be ignored forever. It can be delayed, suppressed, mocked. But when the house is on fire, people stop listening to the ones who talk and start looking for the ones who can put it out. So you must become that. You must become the person who can do what others fear, who can speak when others hesitate, who can think when others panic, and most of all, who can act when others need permission. But action without clarity is chaos. That is why the Machiavellian builds not only strength, but foresight. He trains his perception as ruthlessly as he trains his skills. He reads intentions, not just words. He watches patterns, not just events. He understands timing as deeply as morality. And that is where most men fail. They act too soon or too late. They reveal too much or too little. They strike for ego, not for outcome. They confuse movement for strategy. But strategy is not about doing more. It's about doing less, at exactly the right moment. The one who wins is not the one who flails hardest. It is the one who knows where to place the blade, and when. This requires a coldness, not of heart, but of clarity. You must not let your personal frustration turn into reckless urgency. You must not allow your righteousness to blur your precision. Emotion clouds execution. Machiavelli knew this. He did not advise men to feel less. He advised them to show less, to control their passions rather than be controlled by them. Because in a rigged game, emotion is the easiest tell. So be calm, be calculating. Let others burn their energy on spectacle. Let them fight for appearances. You are not playing their game. You are building your own board. And when the moment comes, and it will come, you will not have to announce yourself. The system will already be shaped around you. The silence you once kept will become the echo others hear. The absence they once ignored will become the presence they can't replace. Because power built in darkness does not vanish in light. It expands. But the question is, will you be ready when the moment finally arrives? Most people believe that power is seized in moments of noise, revolutions, speeches, explosions. But Machiavelli knew better. True power is not taken in chaos. It is prepared in quiet. It is forged in discipline. And when it finally appears, it does not ask permission. It arrives already necessary. In a world where institutions reward obedience over insight, where image matters more than substance, and where most are too distracted to notice anything beyond the surface, the wise man must train himself not only to endure this environment, but to bend it. He does not scream at the system, he studies it. He does not complain about the rules, he learns their origin. He does not fantasize about the fall of the powerful, he prepares to replace them. And this requires a new kind of ambition, not loud, not needy, but surgical, not driven by applause, but by architecture. The kind of ambition that does not seek the spotlight, but builds the stage beneath it. This is where Machiavellian philosophy departs from naive moralism. The moralist says, if the system is broken, then I will not participate. But what does that achieve? Withdrawal changes nothing. Silence grants permission. The broken system continues, uninterrupted, comforted by your absence. No, the one who truly seeks justice must be willing to enter the corrupted space without being corrupted. He must be willing to infiltrate, influence, and restructure, not for ego, but for execution. Machiavelli called for leaders who could endure contradiction, who could make strategic sacrifices without losing their soul, who understood that the path to virtue often passes through valleys of compromise, not because they are desirable, but because they are real. You cannot fix a system you refuse to touch. And when you touch it, you will be tested. Not just by your enemies, but by your allies. There is a hidden law of leadership. Machiavelli understood that the higher you rise, the more alone you become. Because power creates distance. It sharpens envy. It forces the people around you to choose, to align with your strength, or to resent it. The Machiavellian does not fear this. He expects it. He does not seek universal approval, he seeks results. He knows that if everyone is comfortable, he is not leading, he is entertaining. A real leader, a true strategist, will always provoke discomfort, not through recklessness, but through the pressure of clarity, through the exposure of mediocrity, through the insistence that things be better, sharper, more precise. The insecure will call it arrogance. The weak will call it aggression. But the intelligent will recognize it for what it is, direction. The Machiavellian is not interested in being liked. He is interested in being effective. And this is the great sin in modern culture, to prioritize impact over personality. But history does not remember who was liked. It remembers who shaped the map. Lincoln was hated. So was Churchill. So was Mandela. Until the results made them undeniable. So if you feel friction, good. If you feel resistance, good. If your clarity unsettles people, if your drive separates you, if your refusal to flatter makes others uncomfortable, good. that means you're moving. Just ensure that your movement is grounded in something deeper than ego. Because strategy without substance is still hollow, and eventually the world catches up. Machiavelli didn't advocate for empty strength. He advocated for resilient strength. Strength that lasts not just for a moment, but across storms, across betrayals, across the shifting winds of public opinion. And to possess that kind of strength, you must stop measuring yourself by the timeline of others. You must learn to play long games in a world addicted to short ones. You must become immune to the dopamine of instant praise and addicted instead to the silence of progress. You must train like an architect, not a performer. Because most men chase exposure, few build foundations. And when the storm comes, and it will, the difference will be obvious. The performer's empire collapses under applause. The architect's empire reveals itself, unshaken, already complete. So ask yourself, are you building or performing? Are you preparing or pretending? Are you committed to the vision even when no one sees it? Or are you only strong when validated? The Machiavellian knows that true power is not reactive, it is rooted, it is premeditated, and it does not need to be explained. It needs only to be revealed when the world has no choice but to see it. This is not arrogance, it is clarity. Because power that emerges too soon is killed. Power that emerges too late is ignored. But power that emerges precisely when it is needed, that is destiny. So what happens when your preparation is complete and the world still isn't ready for you? You don't wait for an invitation. You become the moment they didn't see coming. So what does it take to become that kind of force? The kind that does not ask for authority, but becomes synonymous with it. The kind that does not shout to be seen, but shapes the room in silence. The kind that enters a system, not to be celebrated, but to bend it, slowly, patiently, completely. It begins with discipline. Not the discipline of routine, though that matters. Not the discipline of working hard, though that is required. It is the discipline of emotional control, of mental silence, of knowing when to hold back your instincts so that your decisions are not dictated by fear, anger, pride, or the fragile need to be understood. This is where most fall. They rise just high enough to be visible, and then their ego begins to speak for them. Their need to be validated takes the wheel. They announce too much, react too fast, reveal their map before they've even secured the territory. And the moment they do, they give away the one thing the Machiavellian never parts with: mystery. Understand this. Mystery is not manipulation, it is survival. When people cannot predict you, they cannot prepare for you. When they cannot read your next move, they have no way to stop it. But the moment you explain yourself, the moment you start needing to be understood, you have entered the arena on their terms. You've traded influence for intimacy, and power does not survive in that trade. Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, to few to come in touch with you. Appearances matter, but only when used strategically. What you appear to be must serve what you truly are. The mask is not a deception if it protects the mission. So you craft your image with intent. You speak less, but what you say lands harder. You reveal less, but what you show is calculated. You are calm in chaos, controlled when others unravel. This does not mean you are cold, it means you are composed. And in a world where most people are ruled by impulse, this composure becomes its own gravity. People follow what they cannot shake. They submit to what does not bend. And still, you must be feared. Not in the sense of cruelty, but in the sense of inevitability. You must carry yourself like someone who cannot be dismissed. Not because you say so, but because your presence says it for you. Because you have made yourself the answer to problems people haven't solved. Because you offer what others can't. Because you know what others don't. And because, when the moment comes, you will act. This is what separates the Machiavellian from the idealist. The idealist waits for approval. The Machiavellian builds leverage. The idealist waits to be chosen. The Machiavellian prepares to be needed. The idealist hopes. The Machiavellian decides. You are not owed power just because you are good. You are not owed loyalty just because you are fair. You are not owed opportunity just because you are ready. These things are not given. They are taken strategically, silently, without apology. And yes, it will be lonely. Because clarity is always lonely at first. When you stop reacting like the crowd no longer sees you as one of them. When you say no to the rituals of weakness, the compulsive need to explain, to justify, to overshare, people accuse you of arrogance. But what they are really seeing is a strength they don't understand. Hold the line. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be effective. You are not here to blend in. You are here to become the standard. So build quietly, execute relentlessly, say little, watch everything. And when the moment comes, not if, but when, step forward not with permission, but with presence, and let the silence speak for you. Because in the end, the one who wins is not the one who shouted the loudest, but the one who prepared the longest. The one who watched the system fail in slow motion while laying bricks beneath its future collapse. The one who smiled while others mocked, remained still while others danced, and waited with perfect clarity for the precise moment to emerge. That is not chance. That is design. So what happens after all the silence, all the strategy, all the preparation? You face the one moment Machiavelli never lets you escape, the moment you must decide to act. So we arrive at the final truth, not a conclusion, but a confrontation. After everything, the illusions shattered, the systems exposed, the strategies laid bare, you are left with a choice, one that no philosophy, no mentor, no doctrine can make for you. A question so simple, it hides its weight. Will you act? Not someday, not when it's safe, not when the world tells you you're ready. Will you act when the opportunity demands it, even if it costs you comfort, certainty, or how others see you? Machiavelli never promised safety, he promised understanding. And in understanding, you inherit responsibility. Because once you see how power moves, how it rewards the confident, shelters the incompetent, and punishes those who obey without leverage, you cannot unsee it. And once you understand the nature of the game, you must decide whether to play it or to be played by it. That is the final test. Everything before this has been preparation. All the philosophy, the quotes, the case studies, they were meant to arm you with clarity. But clarity without courage is just observation. The strategist who never moves is indistinguishable from the coward. The thinker who never chooses is indistinguishable from the fool. So here is what Machiavelli would ask of you now. Not to imitate cruelty, but to command reality. To walk into flawed systems not with despair, but with design. To stop waiting for someone else to make it better, and to stop imagining that goodness alone is protection. Because this world does not reward potential. It rewards execution. It rewards those who know how to read a room, bend its energy, and leave with the result they came for. It rewards those who understand that appearance is leverage, that silence is a weapon, that being underestimated is not an insult, it is a resource. It rewards those who build in the shadows and act in the storm. And above all, it rewards those who can live without needing to be liked. This is not a call to abandon your values. It is a call to weaponize them, to stop placing them at the mercy of other people's opinions, to stop performing your integrity and start using it to shape outcomes. There is nothing noble about virtue that never leaves the monastery. There is nothing admirable about wisdom that never steps into conflict. And there is nothing powerful about being good unless you are also willing to be sharp, silent, and strategic. This is your task now. To become the kind of person whose words are rare but final, whose presence is calm but definitive, whose choices do not seek approval, only impact. To become the kind of person whose power was not given, but grown, not declared, but earned, not flashy, but unshakable. Because in the end, no one will remember what you said about justice if you did not have the strength to protect it. No one will quote your ideals if they came at the expense of your survival. And no one will care how good you were if you let the world be ruled by those who weren't. So be dangerous in your clarity. Be ruthless in your preparation. Be surgical in your execution. And be silent until speaking becomes undeniable. Then, and only then, speak so the world forgets the silence that came before. This is the Machiavellian path, not one of cruelty, but of cold truth. Not one of chaos, but of control. Not one of ego, but of influence. And if you walk it with discipline, with vision, with courage, you will not merely survive this world, you will shape it. If you've made it this far, it's because some part of you is no longer satisfied with playing small. Some part of you has already realized that being accepted by everyone means nothing if you have to dilute yourself to earn it. That real strength begins the moment you stop negotiating with your potential. So now I ask you, are you ready to be doubted, misread, even feared, in the name of your own clarity? Are you prepared to be called arrogant just because you stopped apologizing for being precise? If this message struck something deeper in you, if it reminded you of who you've always been, write in the comments, "I choose power in silence." Let's see how many here are done waiting for permission. And whatever you do, keep watching the next video. It's not just a continuation, it's a weapon, one you'll need if you're serious about what comes next. I'll see you there.